All right, we're officially reacting to my boy Philly D. Titanic tourist sub vanished. I don't know anything about this whole story, and apparently some Andrew Tate
we're
news
talking
here
about
too.
Andrew Tate officially being charged, the disturbing truth about the Titanic submersible that's gone missing, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, and RFK Jr. are dogpiling on a vaccine scientist, Fox News of all places just destroyed Donald Trump, and so much more on your brand new Philip DeFranco show, your daily dive into the news. So let's just jump into it. Starting with, this missing sub situation is complete nightmare fuel. You've likely at least heard about it, but let's break down the details. Because right now, 5 people are either dead or dying. So the sub, it's operated by Oceangate Expeditions, a company that does deep sea adventures for tourists, and ever since 2021 has been making annual trips to the wreck of the Titanic. They've been doing that with their submersible called Titan, which dove off the coast of southeastern Canada yesterday morning. It's got about as much space inside as a minivan with 5-inch thick carbon fiber capped on each end by a dome of titanium to keep its 5 crew members safe. And what distinguishes a submersible from a submarine is that the former relies on a surface vessel or platform. But about an hour and 45 minutes after diving, Titan's surface vessel lost contact with it, so the US and Canadian Coast Guards began a joint search operation, with boats, radar-equipped planes, and sonar buoys getting deployed to the area, but finding nothing as of this recording. Now, according to OceanGate, the sub is designed to hold 96 hours of emergency oxygen, and as of this morning, the operations chief said that they estimate between 70 and the full 96 hours were left. You had the US Coast Guard later saying today they believe they have around 40 hours left. But even with that, you have people saying, even if they were found down there, how do you get them back? Right, the Titanic sits at 13,000 feet below sea level, a depth that's extremely remote, high pressure.
13,000 feet below sea level? Jesus Christ. That's just an unfathomable distance.
Freezing. Which, regarding that last note, if the sub suffered a power outage, it's believed the crew could freeze to death before they even ran out of oxygen. That said, officials are reportedly working to get a remotely operated vehicle that can go down deep enough to search for the sub underwater. But again, that's just the search. Because even if they find it, what do you actually do? Especially as you have experts noting how many fail-safes the submersible had, and openly theorizing that what may have happened was an implosion. But again, right now we do not know. And so obviously you have so many people concerned and worried, though I do need to note, not everybody. Right? If you go on social media right now, there are a fair number of posts celebrating this story and pointing out that the crew members are extremely wealthy. Right? Each seat costing $250,000, though typically only 3 passengers are paying customers. The other 2 are the pilot and the so-called content expert, basically a scientist or a researcher. Though regarding the people on board, we know one of them is Hamish Harding, a 59-year-old British billionaire and explorer. When I say explorer, I really mean it. He has 3 different adventure-related Guinness World.
So fuck, dude. If that's the case, that the only reason we're making fun of this is just because, oh, it's just a bunch of rich people that want to go, dude, fuck people on the internet, man. God, I know it's like cringy to come out here and be like, don't make jokes about stuff, but because like I hate to be like comedy police. I'm really, really against that, but it just feels like it's weirdly poor taste. I don't know.
Records. He went to Antarctica with Buzz Aldrin. He dove off the lowest depth of the...
Especially if the only reason that we're allowed to make fun of them is because they're billionaires. Like if these were just normal, regular people, like if these were just people that like, you know, like if it was just the cost of a bus ticket to get down there, and these were like just normal everyday folks that died, these same people would not have been making this many jokes. I don't know. I hate to be the comedy police. I really don't want to be that guy. People can make jokes about whatever the fuck they want, but it feels like it's in really poor taste, and I just don't believe the people that are making the jokes actually... I feel like the only reason they're making fun of it is just because it's a bunch of rich people, which is just, it's just so gross.
Mariana Trench and spent over 4 hours there. And most recently, it went on one of the Blue Origin suborbital space flights.
3, 2, 1,
Also regarding the other passengers, Harding said before the mission that retired French Navy Commander Paul-Henri Nargeolet would be on board, with OceanGate advertising him as one of its content experts. He's 77 years old. He was on the first expedition to visit the wreck back in 1987. Currently directs underwater research at the company that owns the rights to the Titanic. The crew also reportedly includes Shahzada Dawood, one of Pakistan's richest
Twitter can't change it. Yeah,
son. Sure. And then finally, the 5th crew member is OceanGate's CEO himself, Stockton Rush, who reportedly goes on every Titanic mission. Well, obviously, this news is so incredibly shocking to hear. You have a lot of people saying, if we look back now, retrospectively, it's not that shocking. With people, among other things, pointing to this now viral CBS segment from last year in which a reporter noted how improvised the sub appeared, saying it seemed to have, quote, elements of MacGyver jerry-riggedness with lighting from Camping World and construction pipes as ballast. People also pointing to the fact that they steered the craft using a video game controller. Though when researching this story, I found out that's not a weird thing, with that controller apparently standard use for submarines, tanks, drones, and other things for the military. People also focusing on the reporter reading the paperwork he had to sign before the trip.
An experimental...
Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense, right? If it's just like really basic input stuff. This pisses me off that people are okay with them dying just because they're rich. I completely agree. People saying stuff like that don't rationally think, lol. Yeah, it's one thing, like, listen, here's where I sit on it. It's totally okay to be making jokes about these people dying if you'd make the joke regardless of who's on board. If that's just your kind of humor, and you'd be making jokes if these were like regular people or if they're billionaires, but the fact that they're all like older, rich, male billionaires, I feel like that's why people are making jokes. If there was like a single pregnant mother on that submarine, would anybody be making jokes about them fucking dying? Like, I know there's gonna be double standards with everything, but Jesus Christ, it just feels like, dude, my entire fucking feed was like filled with that shit.
Vessel that has not been
and I hate pulling double standard shit like that too. And you can make jokes about it as long as you be able to make jokes regardless of whoever it is. Because, dude, what a fucking horrible way to go to like put yourself in that situation. You're either blowing up, which I guess would be pretty instantaneous, right? So you're probably dying in milliseconds if you're just gonna like be incinerated basically, or you're suffocating to death, which is such a horrible, like literally nightmare fuel way to go. And even if both those things are the case, you're literally gonna end up like, you know, your death's coming, right? Even if it's coming slowly. So God, the mental horror that you must be going through. I don't know.
Certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death.
With them also reporting that the surface ship guides a sub
exactly,
directly
Woozy,
to text
right.
communication, and their communication somehow broke down. And their sub reportedly never finding the wreck, instead just getting lost for 2.5 hours. So they did eventually the next day dive again and did find the Titanic. And in that same story, Rush defended his company.
The pressure vessel is not MacGyvered at all, because that's where we work with Boeing and NASA and the University of Washington. Everything else can fail. Your thrusters can go, your lights can go, you're still going to be safe.
But ultimately, that's where we are right now in this developing situation. While things seem very much hopeless, I'm hoping for the best. And then, this is a quick scheduling update for all you beautiful bastards. Since Monday, of course.
Oh, okay. I thought he was going to give an update about the thing. Okay, I want to watch the next video on this. We just watched that, right? Isn't that what we just watched? Okay.
Imagine that you wake up after 20 years.
Holy cow. Okay.
Black room. And then people are waking up this morning to the news that the 5 people on the Titanic submersible that disappeared the other day may in fact actually still be alive. Though of course you have experts still expressing a lot of caution. And that's because according to the Associated Press, a Canadian military surveillance aircraft detected underwater noises as a massive search continued on Wednesday. And Rolling Stone magazine citing what it described as internal US Department of Homeland Security emails on the search, saying that teams heard banging sounds in the area every 30 minutes. Which is why we've seen a number of people saying, you know, this gives us so much more hope than we previously had, but also we don't know what the sounds are. And so you have this search continuing, but right now the unfortunate reality is if those 5 people are still alive, it's believed that they will run out of oxygen in less than 24 hours. And for now, that's where we are. And then Nicholas Malvagna.
Oh God, such a nightmare situation, dude.
Today, we're talking about reports that OceanGate had ignored employee safety concerns for years before its Titanic tore us up on Twitch right now, and so much more. And that said, a lot to Titanic submersible story, because the search is still ongoing for those 5 people who went missing on Sunday. But in the next 24 hours is going to be one of 2 results. Either this group is miraculously found, there is a rescue, or they are all but certainly dead. With the belief that if there was not an implosion and they have not already frozen to death, their oxygen is expected to run out by tomorrow. And at that point, almost everyone will then be focused on the questions of how the fuck did this happen? People are already asking that, but it will become the singular question, with many people questioning the sub's safety. And with that, we now know that 2 former employees from OceanGate, the company that owns the sub, rang the alarm over its safety years ago. The first reportedly being David Lochridge, OpenGate's former director of marine operations, who sued the company in 2018 for wrongful termination, claiming that they fired him after he raised concerns about the design of the sub's hull because it was made of carbon fiber instead of a metallic composition. He also reportedly disagreed with plans to deploy the sub without first conducting non-destructive testing, which he said would have tested 3 key things: the hull's delaminations, porosity, and voids of sufficient adhesion of the glue.
This is just one of those things that's so hard to believe. I'm sure I guess it's obviously possible that they could have been like, not super diligent with like safety and stuff. And it's obviously not a super regulated industry. Like when you fly on a plane, the amount of regulation that airlines have to go through in order to make sure that like the plane is beyond a shadow of a doubt safe and that you're going to take off and land is like the amount of regulation those airlines have to go through. Like you can trust planes with a lot. You can place big bets that planes are going to take off and land, right? But that's because of how much they're regulated. Like I literally had a flight one time that delayed its takeoff by 4 hours because there was a hatch on the underside of the plane, some little compartment that didn't have anything to do with the flight of the plane at all, just some little hatch that didn't properly close, and they had to literally stop the entire flight, and they had to order a part. It had to come. It is like, and if that thing had never gotten fixed, I guarantee we still would have taken off and landed fine. But like shit like this, I don't know. So what makes this weird though is like, God, if you're paying $250,000 per passenger, it's not a funding issue. And if you're doing this trip annually, how are you not making sure that like everything is tidied up? It's not like you're doing this trip like once every 4 hours and you don't have time to like work on everything, right? Or make sure that it's all tidied up. How is it possible that there could have been any neglect for safety, especially if you're taking billionaires down there? Like, wouldn't those people give a fuck? Wouldn't those people want, like, anybody who's got $250,000 just to throw around? We're talking about really, 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 really rich people, right? So that just seems like, it's just a weird dynamic, right? Where you've got like seemingly cheap parts being used for such an expensive trip. I don't know.
Still being used due to the thickness.
I guess it's possible, right? But or for an airline and they check everything. Yeah, they check everything because if they don't, oh my god.
To the whole. And then another.
And like it's kind of weird too because I feel like there's always like you know, OceanGate. Obviously, if it seems like everything was fine, right? Like they've done this trip before. They had a guy back in 2018 that was like sounding off issues with safety, right? I feel like every company's gonna have something like this. So like whenever something goes bad, like let's say an American Airlines flight had issues, you're always gonna be able to find some employee, right, that was like in charge of engineering or whatever, that's gonna make headlines because they were like, oh yeah, 3 years ago I mentioned this issue, right? Like you're gonna find somebody like that. But I don't know. OceanGate's a little bit smaller, obviously, than like most major airlines. So I don't know. It just, you know what I mean, though, in the sense of like you're gonna find somebody who was like, you know, sounding an alarm years before, probably whenever some shit happens. It doesn't necessarily mean that was even the issue, though. I don't know.
Their former employee echoed Lochridge's points to CNN, in fact, claiming that even more concerns were raised by contractors and employees during his time at OceanGate, and that CEO Stockton Rush became defensive and shied away from answering questions during all staff meetings, with him also claiming he resigned after Rush outright dismissed his concerns that OceanGate might be violating laws relating to Coast Guard inspections. And also of note with all this, the same year OceanGate fired Lochridge, it also sued him, claiming he breached his contract by disclosing confidential information to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration when he filed a whistleblower complaint, with both sides there later settling the dispute out of court, though now, of course, the media is digging it back up. But again, with all this, we're not fully set on just this conversation because, of course, search teams are continuing to race against the clock right now. Especially as, we talked about it on the morning show, we found out that sonar devices have picked up banging sounds every 30 minutes. So as of recording, nothing has turned up from that, and now we're seeing U.S. military, commercial, and Coast Guard assets as well as the New York Air National Guard, the Canadian Armed Forces, and Coast Guard all swarming the ocean surface, even being joined by a French research ship with an underwater robot. But ultimately, that is where we are right now as the clock keeps ticking. And with this being a developing situation, if anything happens, of course, you'll hear from me soon. And then, today, we're talking about the breaking news of what actually happened to those 5 people who were on board the Titanic submersible that disappeared. We've got restaurants hiring fake priests to hear employees' workplace confessions. This large Philip DeFranco. Starting with, the main thing that I've learned from this Titanic submersible disaster is that when I die, I need to die in a historically common and cost-conscious way. Otherwise, motherfuckers on the internet will meme me to death. People have believed that there is a decent chance that there were 5 people at the bottom of the ocean slowly waiting to suffocate to death. And over those 72 to 96 hours, every possible joke that could be made has been made. People threw too soon out the window and said, what about during? But also, that's not where it ended because a number of the places that were covering this news story stopped treating it like news and instead kind of turned it into this television drama. Like News Nation, for example, gave viewers a live countdown to when they thought there was going to be zero oxygen. We also had UK's Channel 5 taking some heat for their decision to make a documentary titled Titanic Sub Lost at Sea, and they're rushing it out tonight. Though given the intense fascination around this story, it's possible that,
yeah, that's just kind of news though, right? That's like the whole news industry is based around just like over dramatizing stuff and taking a news story and like hyper fixating on it and just squeezing it for everything they can, right?
Say, hey,
like it sucks that people are dying in this situation, but like even for like terrible news stuff too, and like it's weird because like people are going to tune into it, right? Like even if you want to watch it and you don't think necessarily the act was bad, like you know what, whenever you have some like big famous person in the news for like, you know, some super inappropriate misconduct, right? Like think of like a Harvey Weinstein situation, right? Like a terrible situation like that. Like as terrible as that is, that's going to get a ton of coverage because people want to tune into it, but it's just horrible, right? And in this situation, people are dying and they're going to make a ton of news stories about it. Apple TV made a fucking TV show based off of like the whole Matt Lauer situation, right? That's the whole morning show. So I don't know. It's like, that's just the news, unfortunately. I get it's a little weirder when people are like actively die. You're not making jokes afterwards or whatever. You're kind of like gamifying the whole story while everything is going on, which feels a little weird, I guess. I don't know.
That's not okay. And then they do crazy numbers. Also, I'll say it's weird that people are trying to politicize this disaster. You have some reporting like, oh, the CEO of the company, he donated to Republicans. Then on the other side, you have people saying and putting out content saying this all happened because they went woke. But with all that said, regarding the Titanic submersible itself and the 5 people on board, we did actually get some breaking news that gave some closure. Because in the lead up to the news today, it was believed that the oxygen was projected to run out, with rescue teams ramping up their search over the past 24 hours, even putting a remotely operated vehicle on the ocean floor. And we learned that this afternoon, they found the wreckage of the sub, with fragments of the craft scattered around a good distance from the Titanic, and OceanGate saying the passengers, quote, have sadly been lost, as well as the Coast Guard explaining.
In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families.
And so now it appears that this part of the situation is over, but of course, like we talked about yesterday, people are wrestling with a few unresolved questions, with one of the big ones that's emerged being whatever went wrong, was was it preventable, right? Not just in, you just don't go down.
Yeah, so I guess they didn't run out of oxygen, right? They must have, I mean, if parts of the wreck had been found, that must have meant the craft exploded, which, I mean, if I'm going to choose a way to go, that's the way I'd want to go. I'd rather do that than fucking suffocate to death. If that's true, though, what's the banging noise they heard? It could have still been them, I guess. I don't know.
Down to the seafloor to see the Titanic. Rather, operator error, or was there something wrong with the vehicle itself? And with that, will there be some kind of legal recourse for the victims as families? Because again, remember, one of the people inside the sub was OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush himself. And we talked about yesterday his alleged dismissal of safety concerns being a big part of the lawsuit filed by a former employee back in 2018. And while obviously he's not here to be held accountable, it's possible that his company will be. We've also seen other questions pop up, like why weren't they able to find the sub in time? Though to answer that, like,
yeah, it's a super weird thing too. Like if this guy, so the owner of the company was made aware of the safety concerns and then still apparently silenced the employee, but then still chose to go down himself in the submarine that he knew was faulty. That probably means there's more to the story. Like the former employee was just like totally unhinged or like making wild, stupid accusations that just weren't true. I don't know. But like if we're all going to start pointing fingers at the owner of OceanGate, he was on the sub. So that means that he like knew the concerns, knew there was a good chance that the sub was just going to not fucking work and still chose to go down in it himself and suffocate or get blown up to death. Like
to understand just
doesn't it, I don't know. Doesn't your gut tell you that there's more to the story than that? He must not have believed the safety concerns, I guess, or just didn't care enough. But God, when you're putting your own life on the line, wouldn't you think you'd care? I don't know.
How impossible a mission like this is. Where they were searching an area twice the size of Connecticut and 2.5 miles deep. Not to mention that the wreck is several hundred miles off the coast, is extremely cold and dark, and the pressure down there is about 6,000 pounds per square inch. But just for reference, the deepest known rescue mission happened back in 1973, and the submersible in that case got towed out of an abyss.
To be fair, they'll never know. Yeah, we'll see.
1,600 feet deep. And hell, when the Navy salvaged the wreckage of an F-35 fighter jet from the same depth as the Titanic last year, it took them 37 days to pull it off. But with all that said, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts regarding this whole situation? And let me know in those comments down below. And then
we'll see what the comments say. Having seen the inside of that sub, I can't imagine why anyone would ever get into it. Well, because you'd get to go down and see the Titanic. Nobody looks at the inside of a rocket that's going to go to space and says, ugh, I don't want to go in here. It's the destination, people. This is one of those situations where it's not about the journey, it's the destination. I wouldn't choose to live inside of a rocket, but if it meant that I got to go up to fucking space and see the Earth, that'd be pretty sick. How can the airlines get away with these obvious... I especially feel awful for the 19-year-old. He had his whole life ahead of him and trusted his dad and other adults. Adults, not teenage adults. Airline... my heart breaks for the 19... Yeah, there's a 19-year-old kid in the sub. The guilt his father had in those final moments had to be immeasurable. Yeah, I guess the only thing we can kind of pray for is, like, hopefully when they died, it was quick and they didn't have a whole lot of time to really process what was going to happen, right? Considering the stepson of the British billionaire on board that sub defended being seen out partying up at a Blink-182 concert as the search and rescue teams from Canada and the US were racing around the clock to find him, I'd say it speaks to the level of sincerity and compassion these sociopaths have for one another. Oh yeah, the son of the British billionaire. Yeah, I saw memes about that too. The son of the British billionaire who was on the sub was apparently also like responding to like OnlyFans models on Twitter. I don't know if that's even true. That could have just been somebody making a meme tweet. I feel terrible for the 19-year-old son who died in this nightmare situation, but the rest of them have more money than brains, and the situation in which they died could be eligible for a Darwin Award. That's so fucked, dude. Not eligible for a Darwin Award. If you had if people had the money, dude, if the trip to go see the Titanic was the same as a bus ticket, tons of people would be fucking signing up for it. It'd probably be a lot more regulated, but damn, dude, to say that like we should blame the rich people for just making a dumb decision to go down and see the Titanic, that's so fucked, dude. Just because they're fucking rich. I hate that it comes from like this place of like just hate rich people because they're fucking billionaires. I don't know. It just seems so... I fucking hate that mentality. They signed their lives away on waivers that mention the diving company is not liable for death 3 times on just the first page. Yeah, that's the risk you take, dude. I'm sure you fucking sign that same thing when you get into a fucking airplane or when you buy an airplane ticket, probably, right? Maybe not actually. I don't fucking know. But you know what I mean? I don't know. You also probably trust if it's a $250,000 ticket, if that's the only thing this company does. I don't know, man. Same thing kind of happened with the actual Titanic. They tried to warn the captain, he didn't do anything. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, it just feels weird. And they descended to the seafloor in a pressurized tin can operated by a gaming console controller while scoffing at all the safety precautions to witness the skeletal remains of the world's most iconic seafaring and engineering disaster that has also scoffed at all the safety precautions. It's hard for people to drum up sympathy for these men while they're dropping $250,000 on a one-way ticket to the ocean floor while everyone is tending with heightened inflation. Oh, Jesus Christ, dude. They fucking died. They lost lost their lives. Jesus Christ, dude. How fucking heartless do people have to be? I don't know, man. It just seems fucked. If you had $250,000 to spare on a ticket to go see the fucking Titanic, you would do it too. You would 100% do it too. God, this mentality is so gross. God, it must fucking suck to live like this, dude. Well put. Both comments are valid and bring the realism we needed to hear. Honestly, the memes about the sub have been an absolute highlight of my week. I feel sad that life was lost and for the families, but at the same time, I can't help but also not feeling quite as sympathetic as I maybe should. Feels similar to dying on Everest. The risks are extreme, and you have to know going into it that you might not come back. I don't really think it's the same thing as that, but okay. In this case, I'd say Everest is significantly safer, as many more people have done it and survived. Yeah, because it doesn't cost $250,000 to get to the top of Everest, especially with how public the information is about OceanGate's various issues. I think they're probably only public now because the news came out. They had the resources to look into it and safety and either didn't or dismissed what they found. It's hard to feel bad for someone who played with fire. Yeah, it's a risky thing, but I don't know. The memes are like, I kind of get what this person's saying, but God, to make all the memes, I don't know. Again, it all comes back to this double standard of the fact that they're rich. If they weren't rich, if they were just like everyday folks, like if it was the fucking girl next door who worked at your local Starbucks, nobody would be fucking making these memes, dude. Nobody. I don't know. The Titan, I see this as a form of missing white woman syndrome. It dominated and overshadowed so many other news stories. A lot of people are comparing this to the migrant boat that sunk off the coast of Greece. For the Titan? That must have been a different story. The sub situation feels very weird to me. I feel bad that I don't feel bad. I wasn't one of the many cheering for it to end this way, but I don't care that it did. Literally everything about the situation was preventable. The CEO was bragging about how he specifically was doing this with underqualified people because it would be more inspirational. WTF. What? Doesn't even make any sense. I don't know, dude. It's just gonna be fucking pissing me off. Like, I don't know, dude. I get making jokes about it, and like people are gonna make jokes about stuff. And again, I hate to be the joke police and say what you can and can't make jokes about, but I just hate that people are making jokes about this just because they're fucking rich people. It just feels weird to me. Money also buys ignorance. Yeah, but it's not ignorance. I mean, they were warned and decided to still go through with it, but it's still sad. Yeah. No offense, but I would use that $500,000 on V-Bucks instead of the sub of the Titanic. Based. True. Anyone know the actual motive of going to see the Titanic? Because they want to see the Titanic. It's the same reason that like rich people want to build a rocket. Why Jeff Bezos wants to build a rocket to go to space. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, they definitely should have. I mean, you would think that like, I don't know, the whole safety concern stuff. Like I get that we're just like reading headlines and news articles, right? That are all talking about how there was like safety concerns already beforehand and blah, blah, blah. And that probably was true. Obviously, it seems like they could have taken some more safety precautions, but like, doesn't that also seem hard to believe if the guy who's receiving the information about the safety deficiencies is also going to put himself on the sub and then send himself 13,000 feet below the fucking surface? It seems weird that the guy is like, he's here and he's like, okay, yep, you're telling me there's safety concerns? No, go fuck yourself. Also, I'm going to get in the fucking boat, in the submarine and send myself to the fucking bottom of the ocean. Whatever. Maybe I have a really bad take on this. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it.